So the Europeans are saying that they have the cards. It is Monday, December 8th, 2025. Let's get into the stories here. So Trump claims that Zelensky's team loves this peace plan to their president that Zelensky hasn't read yet, and that Russia approves of it too. Well, I'm sure that Russia approves of it too. Umarov is bringing that plan back to Zelensky, and they're going to discuss it. They're not letting it leak with any kind of technology. Hours later, Zelensky announced meetings in London and Brussels to lock in European support before negotiations. Trump's not happy that Zelensky hasn't actually read the peace plan yet. Here he is.
I'm a little bit disappointed that President Zelensky hasn't yet read the proposal. That was as of a few hours ago.
Well, that's because, again, he's getting it from Umarov straight rather than letting it get through some kind of electronic medium where it can get picked up and leaked. Okay, Trump is signaling to Zelensky that the clock is ticking and that Washington wants movement, but he's also broadcasting to Moscow that he's willing to lean hard on Kyiv, and that's raising eyebrows in European capitals. His actions here are actually weirdly strengthening Zelensky when he meets with the coalition of the willing. So the Americans, Zelensky says, the Americans want to find compromises, but not on territory, he says. So Trump wants him to give up the Donbass and then everything will go swimmingly. Well, okay, we'll see how that plays out. After the first rounds of talks, the openly non-Ukrainian proposals were removed from the peace plan, Zelensky said. The draft that Witkoff took to Moscow, well, got from Moscow, took to the United States, and then took back to Moscow, was reduced from 28 to 20 points. And so all the worst, or most egregious segments of that were removed. Now, Zelensky arrived in London. He was greeted by Ukraine's ambassador to the UK, former commander-in-chief Valery Zaluzhny. And then he was meeting with Starmer at the prime minister's home office, 28 or 10 Downing Street, and Larry the cat stole the show. So, okay. And it's even, they're both looking at Larry the cat. So, okay. Guaranteeing real security is always a shared challenge and a shared effort. Thank you for your support, says Zelensky. And here we see some quotes from Merz and Macron and Starmer. Just in now, powerful brief remarks by leaders of the Ukraine, the UK, France, and Germany in London. Merz, the coming days could be decisive for all of us. Yeah, I think so. Macron, I think we have a lot of cards in our hands, and that's going back to the White House meeting. You don't have the cards? Well, turns out he has the cards, right? So I think we have a lot of cards in our hands. And if we're honest, the Europeans have a lot more cards to play than the U.S. gives them credit for. If there's to be a ceasefire, it needs to be just and lasting ceasefire, says Starmer. I want you to listen to the end of what Zelensky says here, and then what Macron says here. Listen to this.
In the United States, there are some things which we can't manage without Americans, things which we can't manage without Europe, and that's why we need to make some important decisions. So thank you very much for this deal.
Okay, Zelensky wants to keep all the partners together, and I don't blame him. And Macron's going to answer and say this.
Thank you. Thank you for organizing this discussion, and thank you, Vladimir, for being with us together with Friedrich. I think we all support Ukraine, and we all support peace and peace negotiations to have a sustainable, a robust peace. And I think we have a lot of cards in our hands.
And I think we have a lot of cards in our hands.
The financing and the furniture of equipment and training programs to Ukraine, the fact that Ukraine is resisting in this war, and the fact that the Russian economy is starting to suffer, especially after our latest sanctions. And the
Russian economy is starting to suffer. I'll show you a little bit about that in just a moment.
US sanctions. And now I think the main issue is a convergence between our common positions, Europeans and Ukrainians, and the US to finalize these peace negotiations and re-engage a new phase in the best possible conditions for Ukraine, for the Europeans, and for our collective security. Thank you.
Yeah, and that's really what they need to do. Now, what the U.S. has done has been not kind of cutting out the Europeans, elbowing them out. And I'll get to that in just a second. Here's Zelensky and European leaders wrapping up several-hour talks and security guarantees rebuilding Ukraine. The president has now left the meeting, so he's leaving from Starmer. And again, the closed-door meeting between Zelensky and the European leaders lasted over 2 hours, participants issuing cryptic remarks after a wrap. But it's pretty clear when Macron is saying we have the cards that they feel like they have some kind of edge or advantage. Trump waited a few hours and then posted this an hour ago on Truth Social. This was a New York Post headline: "Impotent Europeans can only fume as Trump rightly sidelines them from Ukraine deal." So he didn't say anything, but he just reposted what was already said. So that looks like his position. Today's Russian papers are loving the new U.S. national security strategy. I just talked about that in my last video. Please go back and look at it. Really important stuff. One Russian paper on implications for Europe, quote, "Trump isn't their daddy anymore," unquote. Kremlin spokesperson comments, quote, "The adjustments in the updated strategy correspond in many ways to our vision," unquote. Now, the U.S. permanent representative to NATO, Matthew Whitaker, says that we're the only world superpower, and so we have to, okay. Well, instead of reading it, let's listen to him.
Well, the simple truth is we are the only world superpower. And we are the only ones, and especially President Trump is the only one, that can bring both sides to the table and work with them to mediate a resolution. There is no one else that can do it. If the United States walks away, if President Trump walks away, the likelihood of peace dramatically diminishes. And so
I'm not sure about that. At this point where Trump is leaning in on the Russian position, if Trump walked away, it wouldn't be devastating. It would be bad, but it's not as bad as Trump pushing for Russia. So it might actually be a net positive if Trump were to walk away. Himself in order to be the mediator. So if he walks away, it might be that the Europeans just step up. Okay, meanwhile, President Putin's goal in Ukraine isn't a secret. He's fighting against Ukrainian sovereignty. This is the Euromaidan Press. Just a couple paragraphs from this article. Putin's strategic goal is the destruction of Ukraine's sovereignty and the installation of a puppet regime in Kyiv, mirroring what he has already done in Belarus. This is the key difference between Russia's view of the war and the Western interpretation of the causes of aggression. Last week, Donald Trump offered the Kremlin a lifeline, a peace deal that would have effectively rewarded Russian aggression. And that is what that 28-point plan would have done. Yet Putin rejected it, which is why I'm not worried about what's going on here. I know that the Ukrainians really have to take this seriously. The European leaders have to take this seriously. But I don't think Putin's in a place where he's going to say, yeah, let's end this war on really bad terms. I think he just wants to keep going. This is just my perspective. Yet Putin rejected it, despite the fact that such a deal would have divided the U.S. and Europe, undermined NATO, delayed Russia's economic collapse, and potentially led to the fall of Volodymyr Zelensky's government. For the Kremlin, this was a win, but he still said no. After 2 years of growth artificially fueled by wartime spending, Russia's oil and gas revenues have fallen by 27% year over year, and the country is heading toward recession. Inflation at 8%, key interest rate over 16%, budget deficit rising, more than half of liquid assets of the National Welfare Fund have been spent since 2022. State monopolies are accumulating enormous debts. Foreign investment has collapsed. Imports of strategic goods have increased 122%. That's because they have to import them. Tax burden on the population is surging to sustain the war. Even basic items are becoming more expensive. The price of vodka has risen by 5%, and the Russians aren't going to be happy about that. So there are challenges for the Russians economically. In the past 100 years, this is Alina Valtonen. She's a Minister for Foreign Affairs of Finland and an MP in their parliament. In the past 100 years, no neighboring country of Russia, no next door neighbor, of course Germany has, but no neighboring country of Russia has attacked Russia. During the same period, Russia has invaded 19 countries, like on their border, right? Putin has given no reason to believe that Russia would change its imperialistic course. Right. I mean, that 19 might include Moldova, which is one country removed, but nonetheless, yeah. Okay. Yeah, this is the way that Russia rolls. Okay, Karaganov. Karaganov says, we're at war with Europe, not Ukraine, and the war won't end until Europe is defeated. Until Europe is defeated. What? Yeah, let's listen to what he has to say. We hope they come to their senses before forcing us to commit the grave sin of resorting to weapons of mass destruction. They're going to make us use nuclear weapons, right? We have no responsibility in this matter. He goes on and says this. We are at war with Europe, not with miserable, pitiful, misled Ukraine. He's coming out and saying it. We're at war with Europe. Listen to this. I'm not the president, so I can say plainly, this war will not end until we defeat Europe, morally and politically. As long as Europe's deranged elites continue their latest mad dash toward global war. Now, as you're reading this or hearing me read this, I want you to listen to this and think, is this true of what's going on in Russia? I don't think a truly stable peace will be achievable, because the deranged elites are moving toward global war. Don't think a truly stable peace will be achievable. At best, the situation might be deeply stabilized for a time because Europe will start to fall apart and revert to it's always been, a junkyard of nations fighting each other, exporting war, colonialism, and racism. Really? Okay, so first, let's look at who Karaganov is, because this is the guy that's speaking here. Karaganov is a Russian political scientist who heads the Council for Foreign and Defense Policy, a security analytical institution. He's also the dean of the Faculty of World Economy and International Affairs at Moscow's Higher School of Economics. Karaganov has been a member of the Trilateral Commission since 1998, served on the International Advisory Board of the Council of Foreign Relations, and has been deputy director of the Institute of Europe at the USSR, now Russian Academy of Sciences since 1983. So he's no slouch, but he's saying what? A junkyard of nations fighting each other and exporting war, colonialism, and racism. Okay, so exporting war, 19 invasions to 0. Colonialism, let's look at the colonialism of Russia. You can just look this up on YouTube. Just look at a history of Russia, like a timeline of the history of Russia. This is 1548. And then if we just scoot ahead, 1565, 1582, 1598, 1615, 1632, 1648, 1665, 1682, 1698, 1715, 1732, 48, 65, 82, 98, 1815, 32, 48, 65, 81, 1898, 1915, and then we have the Soviet Union, and here it's 1931, 1948, and we're starting to see the Warsaw Pact nation in 1965 and 1981, and then you see it withdraw back to the Russian Federation in 1998 and 2015 with the Allied Eurasian Economic Union. Okay, that looks like colonialism to me. That looks like invading your neighbor, even if it's not going to Africa or America or somewhere else in order to colonize. Okay, Alexander Gubev, a well-known expert on Russian foreign policy and senior fellow at Carnegie Russia and Eurasia Center in Berlin, is convinced that the time is working against the Kremlin leader Vladimir Putin. According to his calculations, Moscow has money left for only 12 to 18 months of war. Okay, so they're on a clock. The expert also emphasized that although U.S. President Donald Trump wants the war to end, he is currently exerting almost no pressure on Putin. And that's exactly right. There's no pressure on Putin. Now, we're talking about how they only have a year, maybe a year and a half worth of financing to be able to continue the war. Okay, so here's Maria Zakharova today. Maria Zakharova stated that Europe, without Russia, cannot even afford festive Christmas lighting. There's no money left in Europe, when actually the average salary in Russia is 560 euros. In France, it's 3,970 euros, and in Germany, it's 4,323 euros. But, they can't afford lighting because they just make up stuff. I mean, and they do this very regularly. Putin was complaining about the negative trend in Russian demography. Just Russian women aren't having babies. And so he says this: the measures already taken in the field of demographic development are apparently no longer sufficient. Unfortunately, the negative trend persists and the birth rate continues to decline. He wants to have more little Russians. It is clear that there are objective reasons why the situation is developing this way, including global demographic trends, as well as another impact of the negative demographic waves of mid and late 20th century, which are once again making themselves felt today. Without a doubt, external challenges are also affecting our demographics. Well, you know, you are engaged in a foreign war where you're losing 1 million men. I mean, not all of them dead, but I mean, 1.2 million casualties, and probably the better part of that is lost permanently, and another 700,000 or so men have fled the country. And why would a woman with a terrible economy want to double down on potential poverty with the economy being as it is? So that's problematic for him, right? And then he finally concludes, that was his conclusion. So yeah, that's where Putin is. And here we see, contrary to the propaganda blitz on this platform about Russia and its traditional conservative values, Russia's birth rate continues to fall, now at lows not seen since the depths of the 1990s. And here I showed you this article about a month or so ago, a little over a month ago. Despite costly programs and an intensified family values campaign, Russian women aren't having more children, but they have a solution. They're going to make little Ukrainians little Russians, and that's what they're going to do. They're going, because actually the way that they think about it, these are really Russians anyway, and they just have this mind virus of the political Ukraine thing, but they're really Russians. So they'll just re-brainwash them into being little Russians. Okay, other news. Thailand has attacked Cambodia. Both countries blamed each other of violating the ceasefire. It's reported that one Thai soldier was killed and several more were injured. In October, Thailand and Cambodia signed a ceasefire agreement with President Trump. But clearly they're at each other because stuff are being blown up on the border of Thailand and Cambodia. And this is why Ukrainians don't believe Witkoff's deal without solid security guarantees is a good idea. Because, well, they're still fighting, and they don't want this to happen to them. Meanwhile, Tokyo summoned China's ambassador today. Not Washington, but Tokyo did this. 80 years of American-led Pacific order just inverted in 72 hours. So on November 7th, Prime Minister Takachi declares before Japan's Diet that a Taiwan attack constitutes a, quote, survival threat situation, unquote, under Japanese law. For the first time since 1945, Japan claims the legal right to fight beyond its borders. And then on November 24th, Japan announces missile and electronic warfare deployment on Yonaguni Island. Distance to Taiwan is 110 kilometers. On November 27th, President Trump privately urges Takachi to soften her rhetoric. Reason: protecting U.S.-China trade negotiations. December 6th, Chinese fighter jets radar lock a Japanese F-15, or Japanese F-15s rather, plural, over the East China Sea. December 8th, Japan summons China's envoy, formal diplomatic escalation. Washington's response: crickets, said nothing. Here's what the world just witnessed. The protectorate is now protecting the protector's interest. That is, Japan is now protecting Washington's interests. The client state is now setting alliance policy. The nation constitutionally forbidden from war is now drawing red lines while the superpower counsels caution. Takachi holds 75% domestic approval. China logged over 300 air defense zone incursions last month alone. The Taiwan Strait carries 90% of advanced semiconductor shipping. So this is important. It's not something that we could just go, well, it's just a tiny little island. No, it's important. Calculus is binary. American commitment by Q1 2026 stabilizes the corridor. American hesitation by Q1 2026 invites blockade testing. Global ship supply contracts 10 to 20%. Every vehicle, every phone, every server. Japan has made its position unambiguous. China has made its intentions visible. America has made its priorities clear, and it's bad. Like, if Japan stands alone, what exactly is the alliance for? If you read, like, go back and read Elbridge Colby's book, and he's talking about, like, America can't fight that alone. They need to hold Japan and South Korea and the Philippines and Australia and maybe Indonesia and others together as an alliance to counter Xi. Well, it looks like the Prime Minister of Japan is actually the leader here in holding that together, or trying to hold that together. Okay, now I talked about what changed I said I compare the 2025 national security strategy to 2022 under Biden, where they had pivoted toward looking at Taiwan and Asia as the main theater. it's bad. Like if you look at what changed in this document as opposed to what was in a previous document, you've got to see, if you want to understand what America is about to do, go back to that video. You've got to see this. Meanwhile, U.S. Congress has approved a defense budget that includes $800 million for Ukraine over 2 years, $400 million in 2026, and the same for 2027. It's not great. It's not nothing, but it's just not what it used to be. Yesterday, I talked about Chuck Farrer, and in a video with Greg Terry, we talked about how he was saying that Russian President Vladimir Putin, including Chief General Staff Valery Gerasimov, proclaimed the city's full liberation, and then Gerasimov has been relieved of his command. I said, okay, Farrer said this. I haven't been able to prove it, so we'll keep an eye on it. Haven't seen anything else yet. And somebody said in the comment, like, that is this what? So what happened with Gerasimov, or is this just clickbait? Well, it couldn't be clickbait because I didn't put it in a title or a thumbnail. I just mentioned it within the video and said, we don't know yet. Take it with a grain of salt. So I'll keep an eye on it, and if anything comes of it, so I'll keep you posted. On this day, 1 year ago, the Assad regime fell. It's kind of hopeful to see, like, Syria has been kind of stable since. I mean, as stable as Syria gets, but yeah. And so Zelensky's talking about this. Most importantly, the Syrian people were given the opportunity to restore a normal life and safe life. And we've been right there right away, lending a helpful hand, and we stand ready to continue our support. Whenever security expands in any region, the whole world becomes safer. I think that's right. They're even having a parade in Syria, like, recognizing that they are a year without Assad. Assad is now hanging out in Moscow, by the way, because the Russians and Assad's regime were tight. All right, my shout out is to Roger Kretol, a graduate Patreon member. Thank you, Roger, for your support. And we'll end with this. The Soviet Union collapsed 34 years ago today. On December 8th, 1991, top leadership of Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus signed the Belavezaha Accords. That document formally confirmed the dissolution of the USSR. That was 34 years ago today. All right, my friends, that's all that I have for you right now. Thank you for your time, the likes, the shares, and the subscribes. What do you think about what you saw here? Put that in the comments below. I try to read as much as I can. Thank you again for all the likes and subscribes and all that. But thank you more than anything else for being the kind of person who cares about Ukraine.